Hi, 7th graders. We are going to be kicking off our geometry unit by talking about how to classify angles and more specifically focus on angle pairs. So we're going to start with some quick review of just some angle basics and then go into our pairs of angles that we'll be focusing on. So first of all, when we have an angle is formed by two rays with the same endpoint. So when I look at this angle here, from BA, that's a ray, and then BC is also a ray. All right, so they're sharing that common endpoint B, and that common endpoint is actually going to be what we call a vertex. So the vertex is the point where two or more lines meet, or in this case, where two or more rays meet. So when we have an angle, we're going to look at this angle right here. We can name this angle in a couple of different ways. So just like we would be tracing it, we could name it with three of the points along it. So I could name this angle A, B, C, or I could reverse that angle C, B, A. Notice that both of those examples have the vertex of B in the middle there. I could just also name this just angle B because there's only the one vertex and the one angle. And then this one also has a label of that, it's also labeled angle 1 here too. So I could name this angle 1 as well. Notice that I cannot say angle CAB because then I'm not following the trace of the angle, okay? And I also can't name it angle A or angle C because those are not the vertex. So the vertex is kind of our focal point in any way that we name it. So when we measure angles, we're measuring in degrees. And if I specifically was asking about the measure of an angle, you would see a lowercase m and then this angle sign, which kind of looks like our less than symbol, but slightly different. And then maybe, for example, if I wanted the measure of this angle that we were just talking about, I could say the measure of angle 1. So m angle symbol 1. So if you did not notice these angle symbols already, that's how you label your angles. So some angle basics that you guys have probably learned about in elementary school. We have right angles, or angles that measure exactly 90 degrees. A straight angle is an angle that measures exactly 180 degrees. Acute is any angle that's between 0 and 90. And obtuse is any angle that measures between 90 degrees and 180 degrees. So again, if we look at some of these examples over here, this would be an obtuse angle. When we look here, this is actually a couple of different angles here, but this specific angle right here would be a right angle. This one is a straight angle. Notice that it also is like a straight line. And this one would be an acute angle. To focus on some different ways that we can name angles, here it says name angle DBC two other ways. So here's DBC, that's how I know what angle it's talking about. All right, so I could reverse that and say angle CBD, again, keeping that vertex B in the middle. Or I could also use this number, and it's telling me that that specific angle is angle 2, and so I could just call it angle 2 as well. I would not want to, in this case, just say angle B because, so I don't want to say angle B on this one because if we look, I also have an angle over here that has a vertex of B. And so if I just use the vertex this time, you won't really know if I'm talking about actually angle ABD, ABC, or angle DBC. So again, just kind of going off of that point with this next question that says, can angle 1 also be named angle B? And no, because there's actually 3 different angles that have that vertex of B. So what we're going to be focusing on, though, are angle pairs. So there's a couple of different pairs of angles. I'm going to be highlighting some as well, okay? So vertical angles are angles that are opposite and congruent angles. So what we mean by opposite is when you have two intersecting lines, they're the angles that are going to be directly across from each other. So angle 2 and angle 4 here would be congruent and vertical, and angle 1 and angle 3 are going to be congruent and vertical. And you'll hear this word congruent a lot throughout the next couple of weeks. Congruent is a fancy way of saying equal. Okay, so basically what that tells me is that if I know that angle 2, let's say, is 135 degrees, then I can look at this diagram and know that angle 2 and angle 4 are vertical, and because they're vertical, they're congruent. So now that also tells me that angle 4 would be 135 degrees as well. Adjacent angles are just angles that share a vertex and a side with no common interior points. Fancy way of saying that they're just two angles that are right next to each other. Okay, so if we look, angle 1 and angle 2 are adjacent, so they're sharing a side. Angle 1 and angle 4 are adjacent, again, they're sharing that side there. Angle 3 and angle 2 are adjacent, sharing a side, and angle 3 and angle 4 are adjacent, sharing that side. So adjacent angles are just two angles that share a side. There's no other relationship necessarily between them. Complementary angles are two angles whose measures have a sum of 90 degrees. Each angle is called the complement of the other. So complementary angles might be adjacent to each other, but they don't have to be. They're just two angles that are going to add up to 90 degrees. So we're going to look at this diagram first. So here I have angle A and angle B. Angle A measures 50 degrees, angle B is measuring 40 degrees. I have two angles that if I add up 50 plus 40, I'm going to get 90 degrees. And so because of that, I can say that those two angles are complementary angles. You may also see some diagrams that essentially show you a right angle that's been split somehow. And so here, I know that angle 1 and angle 2 are complementary because together they're forming that right angle, which is noted by that little box in the corner. So both of these are examples of complementary angles. To think of a way to remember complementary, you can think of like part of the 9 being a C for up here. So then we can think complementary angles. Supplementary angles are two angles whose measures have a sum of 180 degrees. And each angle is called the supplement of the other. So again, these might happen to be adjacent angles that are forming essentially a straight line. Okay, so those would be supplementary angles. Or they could be separate angles that just also happen to add up to 180 degrees. In this case, we have two right angles. Angle A is 90 degrees, angle B is 90 degrees, so together they equal 180 degrees. So these are supplementary angles. And over here, angle 1 and angle 2 are supplementary angles. A linear pair is just a special set of supplementary angles that are adjacent as well. So this would be a great example of a linear pair as well. So they're two adjacent angles that are also supplementary. So they're forming like a straight line or a straight angle together. If we look over here at this diagram, name the indicated angle pairs. So the first angle pair it's giving us is angle ABD and angle DBE. So they're not adding up to 90 degrees. They're not adding up to 180 degrees. They're also not directly across from each other. And so these are just adjacent because they share this side. If we look at angle CBE and EBD, all right, this one's a little trickier. I see that this over here is a right angle, which tells me that these over here are also going to be a right angle. And so these two angles together would form 90 degrees. So those are complementary angles. They're also adjacent angles. And then if I look at angle FBA and angle DBC, those angles are the ones that are across from each other. All right, so we have some intersection of lines and they're across from each other. And so we call those vertical angles. So that's just a quick little rundown